So today we're jumping forward a bit to February 6, 2026.
Right.
We're picturing ourselves at the opening ceremony of the Milan Cortina Winter Olympics. And the theme you see everywhere is harmonia.
Harmony.
But if you actually dig into the reports from that time, that word starts to feel pretty ironic.
It creates a fascinating tension, doesn't it? Because on the screen, you have this absolutely seamless masterpiece of Italian, soft power.
Right.
But then you look at the reality on the ground and you're seeing Mafia infiltration, you're seeing serious environmental damage, and a construction timeline that was, frankly, a race against total chaos.
And that's our mission for this deep dive, to unpack how Italy managed to pull off the first ever polycentric games.
Spread across 22,000 square kilometers.
And what the real cost of that ambition was. So let's start with the spectacle itself, the illusion at San Siro Stadium. They called it a living museum.
It was a very clever move. They pivoted away from, all the digital projection mapping and went back to pure human artistry.
I saw that. Dancers painted to look like marble statues.
Exactly. From La Scala, painted to look like Canova's Cupid and Psyche. And then, for sheer visual impact, these giant paint tubes just dumped rivers of silk onto the arena floor.
It looked incredible. But you use that word, polycentric. That seems to be doing a lot of heavy lifting for the fact that these games were, all over the place.
Oh, it was a logistical necessity more than a choice. The organizers had to stitch together 4 completely distinct clusters. You had Milan, Cortina, Livigno, and Predazzo.
And for someone watching at home, it just looks like one event.
That's the thing. The broadcast was the bridge. But physically, these places are separated by actual mountain ranges.
And they kind of leaned into that fragmentation with the ceremony, too.
It did. It was this wild cultural mix. You had Andrea Bocelli singing Nessun Dorma, for the emotion.
Classic high culture moment.
And then moments later, giant papier-mâché heads of Verdi and Guccini are dancing to 80s disco.
And Mariah Carey singing Volare.
And Mariah Carey. It was campy, sure, but it's also a distraction.
From what?
From the fact that the Parade of Nations itself was fragmented. For the first time, athletes didn't all march together. They marched in whatever cluster they were competing in.
So it broke that one moment where the whole world usually stands together?
It did. But they tried to tie it all back together with technology. We saw the Italian team in those white Armani uniforms.
One of his final projects, right?
Yes. But the real unifying attempt was the double cauldron.
Okay. Lighting 2 Olympic flames at the same time.
Simultaneously. One in Milan, one in Cortina. They used this incredible mechanism inspired by Da Vinci's knots to synchronize them.
But let's talk about the infrastructure needed to connect all those dots. Because when you pour billions into construction in Italy, you tend to attract some very specific attention.
And you're talking about Operation Reset. This is where the story gets really gritty.
Yeah.
Just months before the games, police uncovered this criminal cell that had infiltrated Cortina. And these weren't just opportunists. They were linked to the Lazio football ultras and to Roman organized crime.
Wow. And what were they doing?
Taking over nightclubs, controlling drug distribution, basically getting set up to capitalize on the huge tourist wave.
And that's just the service industry, the construction side.
Sure.
That feels like where the real money would be.
That is where the 'Ndrangheta's involvement comes up. In 2024 alone, Lombardy had to issue 50 bans to companies just to keep them away from public contracts because of mafia ties.
So how does it work?
It's the black hole of subcontracting. You have something like 516 subcontracting firms involved. Once the money filters down that many layers, all transparency just evaporates.
If we follow the money, though, what does it tell us? The total budget was about $5.7 billion.
And this is the most telling statistic of the whole games.
Okay.
87% of that money went to roads, railways, and concrete. Only 13% went to the actual sports facilities.
So, wait, the Olympics were just the marketing campaign for a massive asphalt project?
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
And that asphalt had a heavy environmental cost. The bobsleigh track in Cortina, that alone was $118 million and required them to destroy a historic larch forest.
But the snow was the bigger crisis, right?
A much more immediate one. To make the slopes look perfect for television, they had to use almost 85 million cubic feet of water for artificial snow.
What is that in real terms?
It's about 380 Olympic swimming pools.
Wow.
And they're drawing that water from alpine rivers like the Boit during a period of water scarcity.
Which explains the social friction, the protests.
Absolutely. You had the icy out demonstrations in Milan. Housing activists were literally smashing mock Olympic rings that were labeled eviction and speculation.
Because the games were driving up rent.
And it even got into the stadium. There were reports that the American Vice President J.D. Vance was actually booed by the crowd during the broadcast. It seems it was largely because of his massive U.S. security detail, which was just completely disrupting the city for everyone else. It created this picture of a games that looked stunning from a distance, but felt abrasive up close.
So it leaves us with this paradox, a masterpiece of television that required draining rivers, pouring concrete, and, battling organized crime just to get on the air.
It really forces the question, doesn't it? Is this polycentric model the future for the Olympics? Or does spreading the games out just spread the corruption and environmental damage out with it?
A heavy thought for such a bright spectacle. Okay, so think about it. Super Bowl Sunday.
Right.
And historically, it's the one day of the year where the United States actually lives up to the name. We all eat the same snacks, watch the same commercials.
We argue about the same halftime show.
Yeah.
It was the last campfire we all gathered around. Some sociologists even called it a secular religion.
Yeah.
But looking at the sources we're covering today, that era is, it's officially over.
And we aren't here to talk about the spread or, the quarterbacks. This is more of an autopsy on the American monoculture.
Mm-hmm.
Because for Super Bowl LX, the screen has just cracked. We're looking at the first ever split screen Super Bowl.
Fractured. Two competing, ideologically opposed spectacles happening at the exact same minute.
Let's break that down. First, you have the official show. This is the NFL and Apple Music. They've booked Bad Bunny as the headliner. And the sources are all clear on this. It's not just a concert, it's a huge cultural stake in the ground.
And it's performed entirely in Spanish.
Entirely.
And the details here, they really matter. It's not just the lyrics. They've even opted to use Puerto Rican Sign Language for the broadcast, not American Sign Language.
That is such a specific and deliberate choice. It sends a really clear message about who the NFL is prioritizing now.
Gen Z, the Latin American market, a global audience.
Exactly. And you can't ignore Bad Bunny's history here. I mean, the man is a political lightning rod. Remember the ICE shout out at the Grammys. This halftime show has a definite viewpoint.
Which, of course, creates the vacuum for the counter-programming. And this is where the story gets really fascinating. While Bad Bunny is on NBC, Turning Point USA is streaming an alternative show.
And they're doing it on Rumble and on X. They're calling it the All-American Halftime Show. The lineup is basically designed to be the sonic opposite of Bad Bunny. You've got Kid Rock, Brantley Gilbert, Gabby Barrett.
And the marketing, it's explicit. They frame it as David versus Goliath, a defense of, faith and freedom against a corporate woke machine.
It's a perfect example of what some call cyber balkanization, that term for when the internet just splinters into groups that...
They only talk to themselves.
Yeah.
But this isn't just chat rooms anymore. This is live entertainment. They aren't trying to get on TV.
No, they're bypassing legacy media entirely,
Right.
streaming it right to their base. And you might think, okay, this is just a cultural temple tantrum.
But it's not. The financial data in these articles suggests something else entirely. This is a business model.
Yes, that's the key insight, right?
Right.
It proves that the parallel economy is actually viable.
It's viable.
Yeah.
We aren't just seeing angry tweets. We're seeing an audience and an advertiser base that's large enough to sustain a completely separate ecosystem. They don't need the Super Bowl anymore.
They can just build their own.
Yeah.
But the part of this research that, it really floored me, was this thing we're calling the Sinclair paradox.
Oh, this is the best part. It's almost cynical brilliance.
It is. So Sinclair Broadcast Group, they own a ton of local NBC affiliates, right?
A massive number.
So on their main channels, they are airing the official Game Bad Bunny, Spanish lyrics, and all of it.
Wow.
And they're collecting that premium ad revenue.
Mm-hmm.
But at the exact same time, on their digital sub-channels like Charge,
They're airing the Kid Rock alternative,
they are literally playing both sides.
monetizing the polarization. Whether you want the globalist pop party or the all-American protest, Sinclair's the one selling you the ads.
It just highlights the whole situation. It's not about unity anymore. It's about segmentation. So what does this do to us sociologically? If we lose the Super Bowl, what's left?
Well, the sources bring up this concept called the Omphalos.
The what?
Omphalos. In ancient times, it meant the navel or the center of the world. And for a long time, that stadium was our Omphalos, the place where American reality converged for 3 hours.
And now language is the wedge. You have one side seeing a Spanish-only set as a celebration of heritage.
And the other side sees it as an act of alienation. When language becomes a proxy for identity, you lose the ability to have a national conversation. We aren't just disagreeing, we are physically inhabiting different realities.
It feels like we're past simple polarization. It's not just that we vote differently, we're literally watching different channels.
The water cooler moment on Monday morning is gone.
It's gone because you didn't see the same show.
That's the reality of the 2026 landscape. The era of the monolith is over. We are in an era of, I guess, permanent cultural segmentation.
Which leaves us with a pretty heavy question to chew on. If we as a nation can't even agree to watch the same 13-minute concert, does the concept of a United States even exist anymore?
Or have we just moved into a cultural Cold War where we all just retreat to our separate corners?
It's definitely harder to find the middle ground when you can't even find the same channel.
That's for sure.
Muscat, Oman.
And if you're just looking at the headlines, you'd think, okay, standard diplomacy.
Right, just another round of talks. But the strategic report we're diving into today paints a very different picture.
A much more urgent one.
Our mission is to strip away that political theater and get to the military reality. Because while the diplomats are in Oman,
The USS Abraham Lincoln is leading a massive armada just over the horizon in the Arabian Sea.
and the talks themselves, they're not even direct, they're proximity talks.
Meaning the U.S. and Iranian delegations aren't even in the same room. But the U.S. sent a message that is anything but indirect.
You're talking about Admiral Brad Cooper.
Exactly. The CTCOM commander. He's physically sitting at the negotiating table.
In full dress uniform. I mean, that's not subtle.
No. It's putting a loaded gun on the table next to the water pitcher.
Yeah.
It's basically saying the time for talking is almost up.
And you can't help but think about what just happened last month.
The Venezuela ghost. It's hanging over everything.
Yeah, Operation Absolute Resolve. The U.S. goes into Caracas, grabs Maduro, and they're out. It was incredibly fast, almost surgical.
So the natural question everyone's asking is this just Venezuela 2.0?
Is Tehran next?
And the report is very, very clear on this. No, absolutely not. Well, Venezuela was a strike against a hollowed-out military in America's backyard. Iran is. It's a different beast entirely. You're talking about huge strategic depth mountains,
And layers of air defense. This isn't a snatch and grab. This would be a grinder.
a serious grinder. And there's a specific piece of hardware in the sky that tells us the U.S. knows this.
The E-11A BACN aircraft.
This is the key. For anyone who doesn't follow aviation tech, just think of it as a huge, high-altitude flying Wi-Fi router.
It lets jets and ships and ground forces all talk to each other, even over mountains that would normally block signals.
Right. And in 2025, during the last big flare-up, the U.S. had one in the region.
And today.
The report confirms at least 3.
Wow. Okay, so you don't triple your command and control network for a small operation.
You do that when you're preparing for a massive, complex air campaign. Hundreds of assets in the air at once.
But Iran isn't just sitting there waiting. The report highlights a real irony in their arsenal.
Yeah, they're preparing to fight America with American engineering.
Their main drone, the Shahed 129, is basically a clone of a U.S. Predator drone they captured.
And they're still flying F-14 Tomcats.
The planes from the 70s, are they even combat capable?
Apparently so. It's a 50-year-old Echo, They know they can't win head-to-head, but they can make it incredibly painful.
And while all this is happening at sea, the ground is literally crumbling under the regime at home.
The figures from Bloody January are they're horrific. Estimates of up to 36,500 protesters killed.
So they're fighting a war on 2 fronts. A superpower at sea and their own people in the streets.
Which explains the deadlock in Oman. The U.S. wants a grand bargain. Nukes, missiles, proxies, the whole package.
But Tehran can't do that. Not right now.
No way. Giving up their missiles, which they see as their only real insurance policy, to them that's just suicide.
So you have a complete disconnect. What are the odds the report gives this?
It's grim. Less than a 20% chance of a deal. And a greater than 60% chance of war starting within weeks.
That's a perfect storm. External pressure, internal revolution, and no diplomatic off-ramp.
And there's a date circled on the calendar. February 14th.
The opposition leader, Reza Pahlavi, has called for a global day of action.
If that spark connects with the anger on the ground, the regime might feel its control slipping completely.
And a cornered animal is the most dangerous.
They could lash out just to try and rally people to the flag.
Which brings us to a really frightening thought about all this. Deterrence theory is built on the idea that the other side has something to lose.
Right, that they want to avoid destruction.
But if a regime is already killing its own people by the thousands and fighting for its very survival, at what point does maximum pressure stop being a deterrent and just become a countdown? The war in Ukraine is grinding into its fourth year, but something just shifted dramatically.
Yeah, it really has.
And we're not just talking about the front lines. We're talking about the digital battlefield and a huge diplomatic gamble happening in Abu Dhabi.
It's a pivotal week. We've been digging through a whole new stack of material diplomatic cables, some frontline tech reports, and, the latest economic data out of Moscow.
And it paints a very complex picture.
It really does. It shows a war becoming, more high-tech and at the same time more desperate.
So our mission for this deep dive is to connect all of those dots for you. We need to unpack this thing called Operation Whitelist.
The digital blockade.
Exactly. And the new U.S. 28-point plan, what's actually in it, and why Europe is suddenly creating its own path.
Okay, so let's start with that digital front. Because what happened between February 2nd and 5th, that wasn't just a technical glitch.
Right, Operation Whitelist. Reading the reports, it seems like a total flip of how they were managing Starlink before. They used to play whack-a-mole, right? Trying to blacklist stolen terminals.
Exactly. It was purely reactive.
Yeah.
Russian units would get these terminals on the black market, and Ukraine would try to find them and shut them down. A losing game.
Uh-huh.
But on February 2nd, SpaceX and the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, they just flipped the logic. They put up a hard geofence.
So instead of everyone can connect except these bad guys, it became no one connects unless you're on this specific list.
Precisely. If your terminal ID isn't on the ministry's whitelist, you get nothing. And the effect on the Kupiansk front was, it was immediate. Sources are calling it a command collapse.
Wow.
You've got these modern Russian units forced back onto old-school analog radios.
Which is a complete nightmare. Unencrypted, slow, easy to triangulate for an artillery strike. But the sources mentioned something else. It neutralized their drones.
That's the critical piece. The Russians had modified their Shahed drones to rely on Starlink for, real-time guidance.
So they could adjust targets on the fly.
Yes. But when the whitelist went live, those drones didn't just lose their connection. They basically reverted to dumb weapons, just flying to preset coordinates, no more maneuvering.
That technological leverage, that has to be the ace Ukraine brought to the table in Abu Dhabi.
It certainly set the stage. While all these screens were going black in Ukraine, the diplomats were meeting. You had Trump's envoys, Witkoff and Kushner, meeting with Ukraine's defense minister Umarov and Russian officials.
And on the surface, you see a win. They got a prisoner swap, 314 people, and they restored the U.S.-Russia deconfliction line. But then you look at the draft of this 28-point plan.
And the cost looks incredibly high for Kyiv.
It seems enormous.
It's heavy. The plan proposes freezing the current front lines, and it explicitly bars Ukraine from joining NATO. But the real poison pill, is in the details about force structure.
The troop cap.
Yeah, it caps the Ukrainian military at 150,000 personnel.
150,000. For a country with that kind of border, that would essentially make them indefensible long term.
That's the fear. And look at the wording they use for Crimea and the Donbass. The draft text calls them de facto Russian.
De facto.
Yeah.
That is dangerous legal framing. It's not full recognition, but it creates this gray zone that sort of legitimizes the annexation over time.
It does.
But that raises a question. If Russia is being offered such good terms by the U.S., why are they even negotiating? Why not just wait?
Because their economic clock is ticking much faster than their military one. The Kremlin is looking at real stagflation. The data shows inflation is over 9%, and their budget deficit has ballooned to, almost 4.5% of GDP?
That's double their plan. So the oil price cap is finally starting to bite hard.
It's that combined with the just the unsustainable cost of the war economy. They need a pause. But Europe sees this weakness, and they are not on board with the U.S. plan at all.
Right. And this brings us to the SAFE Fund, the security action for Europe, a 150 billion euro pot. But the mechanism, this pay-to-play thing, is fascinating.
It's a very clever workaround. So take the UK. They want to send more Storm Shadow missiles, but their domestic budget is tight.
Okay.
Under this new scheme, the UK just contributes cash to the main European SAFE Fund. The fund then turns around and awards a defense contract back to a British manufacturer to build those exact missiles for Ukraine.
So it keeps the British defense industry running while getting around their own budget politics. It's basically a coalition of the willing for weapons.
It is. It's Europe realizing they can't outsource their own strategic survival to Washington anymore.
So, to sum it up, we have a major tech victory for Ukraine on the battlefield. a Russian economy that's clearly hitting a wall, but this immense political pressure from the new U.S. administration.
It's a perfect storm of tactical success and strategic vulnerability.
And it leaves us with a really provocative question to think about. With things like this safe fund, are we watching the end of NATO as we know it? Or is this the difficult birth of a truly independent European military power?
That is the question that's going to define the next decade. That's all the time we have for this deep dive. Thanks for listening.